Gabe, big news coming out of Texas today. Southwest Airlines is going to let people, I think in 2025, fine print, choose their own seats on flights.
I thought this was such interesting news, Zach, because it seems to really fly in the face of the brand that Southwest has built and kind of everything that they've created their brand around. It's been, I think, 50 years that they've been doing choose your own seat. Southwest was supposed to be kind of the fun airline where it was a little bit less, less restrictive than some of the other airlines. And now they're going to make you choose a seat. And I thought the reasoning behind it was very interesting. Did you catch that in the articles that you read?
I did, but I want to point out something. The way you just said "make you choose a seat" versus how I would have said like "you get to choose a seat."
Yeah,
I
true.
think
Okay, fair enough.
that's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, as we were talking about this, I learned something about you, which is that you have never flown on Southwest before, which I don't know how you have gone through your entire life and not flown on a Southwest flight.
Especially like I mentioned, Denver is my main hub. So you've got Southwest, you've got United, and you've got Frontier. I have flown many airlines now, but never Southwest. But not to say like I told you so, but I want to pick my seat. I just told you I don't want the middle seat. Sometimes I don't even want the window seat. I'm an aisle seat guy.
Same.
So rolling the dice on Southwest is kind of scary, but I do think Southwest even has free luggage, right? But
They do.
I always end up on United and Delta, which if we're going down the airline path, I hate to throw shade at Delta this week. I do like Delta, but I've never flown Southwest.
Yeah, Delta's having a tough week. I think we can probably set that one aside. But yes, you do get free baggage, or you get one free bag on Southwest, which is nice. You're not having to get hit up for additional bags. But the reason that they're doing this, and I think this really ties in nicely to the episode that we wanted to go through today, Zach, which is talking about customer experience and really customer journey as consumers are going through their entire journey with a particular company. But the statistics in the article that were discussed in the Southwest case are 80% of their customers actually want to choose their own seat. And when they surveyed people who don't fly Southwest, like you, 86% of those people wanted to be able to choose their own seat. Or pre-choose a seat, I should say, right? Not just choose it as a complete cattle call when you're,
I
when you're,
I'm
when you're
sorry, Gabe,
boarding the
but
plane.
I honestly don't understand why someone wouldn't want to pick their seat in advance. Like I feel like that's part of the experience for me. Well, I don't want to say part of the experience, but like I want to pick my seat and not be, middle seat next to the restroom kind of thing, right? Like I like that's a deal breaker for me. So Southwest, maybe I'll fly Southwest next year.
Well, the reason that they did it forever is because they said that it created a situation where you could do faster turnarounds, and that was a huge way that they were able to make additional money. Is that they were able to turn the planes faster than people who were doing choose your seat when you make a purchase, and I guess they've done studies now that show that that's not really the case. That it doesn't matter whether you pick your seat before or you choose your seat once you get on the plane. The boarding process basically takes the exact same amount of time. So now they're like, well, I guess we can figure out a way to make additional money off of this, because that is the annoying part when you go to travel on one of the other airlines. Is as soon as you go to pick your seat, you're likely getting the crappy seats in the back of the plane unless you're willing to pay more or you have some sort of status that gets you upgraded into the front of the plane, or not having to sit in the middle seat by the bathroom, as you said. So that is the one part that's I think Southwest has been able to push back against, where that it was kind of democratic, right? It was just choose it when you get on the plane. But it is a bit different than a lot of the other airlines, and it's just interesting seeing them relenting on that and going back to the standard model.
I have two thoughts on that. One, as it relates to customer experience, I want to bring back Delta, but we're talking about customer experience today. And one of the things I've always loved about Delta is I think they were one of the first airlines to offer like free messaging in flight. So you could use like iMessage or different messaging apps in flight. It's cool because I remember like I'd be flying with my sister and we could like text each other on the plane, sitting apart, or people on the ground, and that was fantastic. But even now, Gabe, we love broadband, but some airlines are even offering broadband as part of broadband in-flight Wi-Fi as part
Yeah, I don't know
of.
that I would I don't know that I would call it broadband. It's
I was
kind
gonna
of
say I had to backtrack there, but they're offering
yeah.
in-flight Wi-Fi as part of this experience. And when I book a flight, let's say I'm flying, United versus Delta to the same destination, I'm willing to pay a little bit more to have the Delta experience, which I hate saying that this week, not stranded, but having that in-flight Wi-Fi, being able to stay connected, I that's valuable to me. The other part of this as it relates to customer experience, if I ever start my own airline, there will be no overhead bins. I feel like that's the biggest, slowdown is people
Oh,
getting their
no doubt.
bags in. The bag's too big, so you can't store it. That's out on my future airline that I won't start, but I had to get that in there.
Oh my gosh, it's so chaotic when you're getting on the plane and trying to cram bags into the overhead bin. It's just never a good situation. The Going back to your Wi-Fi comment though, you're right. Delta is free, basically free Wi-Fi as well as free connectivity for text messaging and things like that. And do you know how much American charges?
I don't know.
It's $25 for a single flight for Wi-Fi. It's outrageous. And United is much more reasonable. Southwest is much more reasonable. I don't know about other airlines. Those are the primary ones that I fly. But yeah, American's $25, dude. It's insane.
This might be the Gen Z in me, but I don't know why you wouldn't just offer that. I mean, Delta seems to be doing a good job. I think Hawaiian Airlines maybe. Don't quote me on that one, but there's different airlines who include this as part of your ticket, and that one just seems like a basic need. I don't know if that's appropriate to say, but why would you not include that outside of the cost, of course?
Yeah, agreed. Well, the cost has got to be pretty nominal. It's one of those things where once they upgrade the planes, then there's some payback period, and then it's basically pure profit, which is probably why American is doing that. They are probably making a ton of money on it. But call back to a previous episode or previous two episodes, I guess I should say, Zach, where we were talking about pricing and pricing structure and pricing psychology. It seems to me like basically including that price of Wi-Fi in a bundle of your airline ticket is a much more approachable way to get people to pay for it versus they get on the plane and then they go, oh my gosh, I got to pay $25 for Wi-Fi. Like, this is insane.
And keep me honest too, Gabe. I think with Delta, if you have a Sky Miles account, I think that's kind of their prerequisite too. But I
That is
agree
true.
with you. Having that, I don't want to call it all inclusive, but having that experience ticket versus the add-on, because then you have the luggage, the carry-on, so on, so on. That adds up. But
Yep.
that's as much as I can say about Delta and the airline industry today. Customer experience, Gabe. I think
Yes.
I think there's a lot to talk about with customer experience to a point where this could end up being multiple episodes. But I think customer experience and marketing very much, play hand in hand here. And what customer experience is it's the impression your customers have of your brand, not just when they purchase your products and services, but throughout that entire journey.
Yep. Yeah, it's a great way to put it. And I know we want to talk through a couple of specific examples here, Zach, sort of personal experiences that we've both had recently about a buyer's journey. And one of the things that I've found is you're oftentimes as a marketer or, even when I worked in customer success, I was thinking a lot about the customer journey. And you'd put these big like post-it note things together or try and diagram out a workflow of what the customer buyer journey is. And as much as marketers love to do that, it's very, very rare that a customer actually follows your optimal buyer journey. And we're going to talk through that in some of these specific examples. I know in my case, my recent purchase that we're going to talk through was very chaotic and did not necessarily follow a normal buyer's journey. So really important to understand what experience you're delivering to your customers throughout that buyer's journey so that no matter where they enter and exit, they're having there's consistency throughout that entire journey.
Yeah, and I think there's two components. I mentioned the marketing component, but when I think of the customer experience, I think of the product and I think of the people, right? So ideally, we've got this product that solves a problem. It meets someone's needs. It amazes people, right? They're excited to buy this, right? There's your product. But on the other side of your business, you have the people who support the product. It could be your sales team, your customer support team, really anyone who inspires the delight in the customers. And I like to think of, again, that customer experience not just about being marketing, not just a single silo within an organization, but again, considering the products and the people behind that.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and that's exactly it. It's more than just that purchase. It's customer experiences, including not only the purchase of that product or solution, as you said, that's amazing or delighting somebody, but it is that ongoing interaction that somebody has with the brand, whether it be through social media, digital experiences. Again, not only after they purchase the product, but also all the experiences that they have before they purchase the product too, and what all of that means from a buyer journey perspective.
Yeah, and ultimately the goal here with customer experience marketing is to build that strong connection, to build a strong emotional connection where your customers feel valued and understood. So there's a lot that goes into the customer experience. This is an area I love reading up on, studied in college a little bit as well. So I'm very happy to go through this topic today here, Gabe. But you mentioned a couple of examples here, and I have some data, and then I want to jump into our examples too.
Yeah,
But
let's do it.
there was a study, and it said 86% of consumers will leave a brand that they trust after just two negative experiences. And I thought that was pretty fascinating. And it makes me think back, like, what brand did I leave after a negative experience? And I'm having a tough time coming up with one, Gabe. I don't know if there's one that you see, but basically, if customers leave that quickly after a negative experience, think about your customer loyalty and the revenue at risk too. This is going to impact your bottom line in your business.
Yeah. The ones that could probably come to mind for me most frequently are restaurants, because that's just the kind of recurring nature of, you have your kind of favorite restaurants and you go to them, and maybe over time either your taste change or things change at the restaurant, or maybe you just went there on a bad day and they were, the whatever food you got that day was crummy in comparison to the experiences that you have. If you've gone there even 10, 15 times and you have a couple of bad experiences, that's where a lot of people are going to bounce. And I've certainly had that experience, going to specific spots that were some of my favorite places in town, and all of a sudden you have a couple of bad experiences and it's like, all right, we're done here. I'm only going to give you so much rope. So I think that's a really practical example of one that probably people are running into on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, one bad experience at a restaurant and I'm gone. So I don't need that second visit. But
I'll
yeah,
give people a little bit more of a chance, I guess, than Zach. Zach's just done with you after one bad experience.
that's life. But the other part here too is, and this is more on the business to business side too, Gabe. But 76% of businesses have walked away from an onboarding experience or an onboarding before the product is even complete or even delivered, because it's too complicated and complex too. And I think that definitely ties back to a lot of what we do as consumers too, whether it's the mobile apps we use or again some of these business relationships too. But I think the data is telling us here that again consumers are very willing to walk away from a bad experience.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. Whether it's on the B2B side or B2C. I mean, I know what we typically talk more consumer stuff on the podcast, Zach, but I think there's a lot to unpack there on the B2B side as well. Ultimately, the people who are buying solutions in a B2B environment, they're still people. They're not nameless, faceless corporations. They're individual people who work at these places. And if you're not providing them a high quality experience throughout the entire onboarding, then they're at a high propensity to churn or to leave as well. So, there's a lot that can be applied across the board, whether it's B2B or B2C, for sure.
And one thing I want to backtrack on here, Gabe, we talked about restaurant experience as a bad restaurant experience. If I have a bad restaurant experience, if I have a bad experience, I should say a notably bad experience at any business, one of the first places I'll go is Google reviews. And I have no problem saying, hey, 1 out of 5, 2 out of 5, here's my feedback. Gabe, again, we just talked about that digital experience and the digital, social media component, all those communication channels. When you have a bad experience, will you share that feedback, or how willing are you to share your experiences?
That's a good question. So I will definitely share good experiences. I don't know that I've ever gone on and left a bad review. I've the ones that I generally will leave, if I had a really good experience, I will go on and leave a positive review. Maybe that's for, an Airbnb that I stayed at that was really awesome, or a great experience that I had at a particular restaurant, or, just a particular business. I will definitely do that, but I'm much more apt to leave a positive experience than hit somebody up with a negative review. But there are lots of people that will do the other side of that as well. Hence why we see such crummy Google scores for a lot of folks out there.
I'm right in the middle. I'd love to give everyone a good review, but I'm not going to shy away either way.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I think that's just, I'm not sure why I wouldn't go on and leave a negative review. I don't know. I'm gonna have to like it's probably like some deep-seated psychological thing that prevents me from doing it. But I'm gonna have to go to therapy and think about that one a little bit.
Well, yeah. Well, if you leave a negative review, then they respond saying like, "Hey, can we connect with you and follow up?" And we'll talk about that component here later today too. But Gabe, I think we've got a couple great examples today. One I think is super cool, and one is like, sadly, it's my example too. But I want to talk about customer experience. And years ago, when I was in college, it was probably 5 years ago actually, I needed a new water bottle, and one of my friends was like, "Oh, you should go buy a Contigo," and I did. I bought one, and I was in Jackson 2 weeks ago, and when I came back, I don't know if it was the elevation change, if the seal, I don't know what happened, but it no longer keeps things cold. And this Contigo water bottle used to keep things cold for like 2 days. I could fill it with ice. 2 days later, I'd still have ice, and I just keep adding water to it. Anyway, so it wasn't keeping anything cold. So I reached out, and I found out they had a lifetime guarantee. And I should mention, I found out the lifetime guarantee after I bought a Hydro Flask. So now I have two brands. But I found out about this lifetime guarantee, and I submitted the documentation on their website. And I feel like it was within a few hours. I woke up the next day, had a midnight email, and it said, "Hey, we're sorry about this. We don't make that model anymore, but here are the two we make. Pick which one you want. We'll ship it no cost." I picked the one I want. It's in my kitchen right now. Otherwise, I would have brought show and tell. But this entire experience was awesome. I went from being frustrated I had this water bottle that couldn't keep things cold to buying a Hydro Flask, a competing brand. And then again, now finding out Contigo has this lifetime guarantee, I have a very positive view of their brand and the entire experience through this entire, replace. I bought it on Amazon initially, so I can't speak to the buying process, but this entire process has been fantastic to a point where if you didn't catch it by now, I will absolutely recommend Contigo to anyone buying. And that's the feedback loop that we kind of get ourselves into. That good experience is going to translate into potentially more sales.
Absolutely. Well, and this sort of leads nicely into my experience recently, Zach, which it's a little more exciting than buying a water bottle, but I like new water bottles. So.
We have two good examples, but Gabe, yours is so much cooler.
So people who have been listening to the last few episodes know that I've been looking for a new car, and I've specifically been looking at Teslas. And so I'll do the end of the story first. So I have a new Tesla, or a slightly used Tesla that's sitting in my garage now. Got the Tesla Model 3. It is awesome. Totally love it. And I would definitely recommend it to people as well. But going back just a little bit in that buyer journey, I wanted to talk about kind of the process that I went through to actually purchase the car and just kind of quickly go through that. So when I started, I've been thinking about going with an electric car for a little while. I don't drive a ton. Most of my driving is very short distances, just around the town that I live, around the area that I live, and then oftentimes my longer drives are to the airport when I travel for work. So I started looking into electric cars, and the more research that I did, whether it be through reviews, Zach, to your point, or just reading articles online, everything kept coming back to Tesla. Like it's the cream of the crop when it comes to an electric vehicle. Besides maybe a Rivian, but I can't afford that crap. So
I'm holding my breath.
Yeah. I know you love your Rivians, and I do like the look of the Rivians too, but that is a little bit outside of my price range. So in the price range that I was willing to pay for, Tesla was definitely at the top of the list. So again, lots of reviews. I don't even know if I told you this, but I felt like you because I was on YouTube, like looking at random videos of people giving reviews of Teslas that I've never heard of before. Like the people that I've never heard of before, obviously not the car. But I was like, oh, this must be what Zach's life is like when he's researching stuff and looking on YouTube.
Oh,
For things.
everything I know. And Gabe, we kind of joked about this because we talk about Rivian all the time. I've test driven Teslas. Very interested. I don't know if I've told you this story, but like when the Model 3 first came out, like my friends and I, like when we'd see one in public, we'd like Snapchat and be like, oh, check it out, look what we see. And now it's like you'd walk down the street, it's like,
Oh, there's so
six
many.
Teslas together,
Yeah.
whatever, right? But it's funny because that's exactly where I go to for my research, right? I go to YouTube, I watch Doug DeMuro, a guy down in Colorado, all these auto YouTubers with Teslas, and it almost makes me feel like, oh, I own one. I'm right there with them. But then, Gabe, when you go out and you buy your Tesla here, again, hearing your feedback, I've got a little bit of FOMO now, and I'm thinking like, do I pull the trigger now? Do I wait for the Rivian in 2 to 3 years? Who knows, right? So we'll talk about that later. But hearing your experience more so with the product has been inspiring to me. But yeah.
Well, and to further that conversation, one of the things that I did once I started really getting serious after I'd done a lot of my initial kind of online research is I don't have a Tesla dealership near me, and I really don't want to haul an hour down the freeway to
Hey
go
man,
test
this is
drive one.
dealership. This is direct to consumer
Well,
here.
well, that's the thing, right? So I started looking at that, and I'm going, oh my gosh, am I really going to spend this type of money on something and not have even sat in one before? Like I'd never actually sat in one before, and I was frankly really close to just plunking down a bunch of cash for something that I never had actually interacted with, which is kind of wild. I kind of felt like an idiot almost for doing that. And my wife and I were talking about it. She goes, hey, we've got to know somebody who's got one of these. Like, you can probably just reach out to them and go, sit in their car for 10 minutes. And I thought, you know what, that's a really good point. So I started kind of going through my Rolodex of people, thought of a friend that I knew who has one. She actually just lives a few blocks away from me. So I texted her and said, hey, I've got a super random question for you. Do you mind if I just come sit in your Tesla for like 10 minutes? And she was very nice and said, yeah, come on by. And it turns out her and her husband actually have two Teslas, two Model 3s. They had one that they were getting ready to turn in, and then they had just bought a new one. She was very kind, let me drive it, got to kind of experience the whole thing. And it was amazing. And I was like, all right, well, now I'm completely sold on it. But going back to our buyer journey conversation, right? Like when we talk about where people are coming in and out of the buyer journey, this is the type of stuff that I'm talking about, Zach. Like, people are just all over the place. Like I started doing reviews, then I'm talking to people that I know, then I'm doing all kinds of other research on, where am I going to actually buy this thing? Like it's all over the place from a journey perspective. And I think, I don't know what your experience is, but it feels like again, when we want consumers to follow this like happy path, it very rarely happens that way.
This is a good example because, like I said, in college or in high school, I can't remember when the Model 3 came out. I think it was high school. Model 3 came out when I was in high school, and everyone's super pumped about this, right? And I said, someday I'm going to have that. And I'm more of an SUV guy, so I don't have a Model 3 today. But then in 2020, like in the middle of COVID, I thought, I have nothing else going on. I should start looking at Tesla. So I started. I test drove one in, I think it was 2021, in that summer, just before I started here. And I went down to Colorado. It was in Superior, and I drove one around. They only gave you like 20 minutes or half an hour with it. And I drove around, and then I get back in my 2020 Toyota 4Runner then at the time, and I was like, wow, I feel like I just, stepped back a decade. And a part of this is the Toyota tax. I've got this fantastic vehicle, I think, that's very reliable. But now I'm looking at this kind of futuristic Tesla. So from 2021 to just this year, actually, it was back in April, I believe, I was looking at Teslas again, and I said, honestly, why not, right? So I talked to Tesla, and by this point, I've had 2 years of research under my belt, probably more than that. But, I've got all the EV apps. I was looking to see where I could charge, the route planning apps, all these apps, Gabe, I shared with you that make me seem
really
like an
helpful.
EV owner.
I'm glad you had all this research done because it's been extremely helpful for me.
Exactly. And then again, back in April now, I went off and Tesla gave me a Model Y to test drive over a weekend. So I got to take it home. I drove it 2 hours, down the highway and everything. And I got to spend some time with it, and I was very impressed. However, the following week, of course, Rivian announced their R2, and then I was, stuck on that. But Gabe, I would say we were in very different places within that journey. I feel like you might have been more maybe more new to Tesla. I had done a few years of research. I had all the apps, right? I actually looked at like all of the routes I drive. Like, can I get to Salt Lake City? Can I get down to St. George? Like what? How long do I have to charge in Cedar City, Provo to get to where I'm going? So I've looked at like all of my routes. Not so much to my family in Montana. Sorry, I don't want to take my Tesla up that far. But I looked at all of my routes to figure out what this looks like. So I would consider myself ready to buy one today. Hearing your feedback, I'm very
Well,
much
but then you get
more
into the
interested
actual
now.
purchase process. Yeah.
Yes,
Well, then
and
we get
that's
into the
that's
actual
where we
purchase
also
process, though,
differ a
right?
little bit too.
Yes, yes, agreed. Well, and you and I were texting about this a lot while I was going through the purchase process. So I wanted to buy one that was I didn't want to buy a brand new one. I wanted to buy a couple of year old one that just had low miles, really high battery, capacity still, where I could, still drive it for quite a long time. But again, I don't like buying brand new cars. It depreciates really quickly as soon as you drive it off the lot, right? So I want something that's lightly used. So then I'm going through all these different. I use Car Gurus as the app that I've used to search for everything. But then you end up on these different dealership websites, and oh my God, Zach, it was a terrible experience. I cannot tell you how bad the experience is of buying a used car. It's just awful. And I know we want to talk about this too, but like having to actually pick up the phone and call people, terrible. Once you get people on the phone, the experience is terrible. There's all these additional fees that they're trying to cram in that, excuse me, that aren't in the overall purchase price initially that you see. It's just an awful, awful experience. And so you were telling me that, well, you can buy these things from Tesla directly. And so I started looking into
Both
that.
used and new,
Both
right?
used and
Yeah.
new, exactly. Yes, that was the thing that I didn't realize is that you could actually buy used cars directly from Tesla and they'll just ship them right to your house, which is honestly pretty cool. But the difference was they're a lot more expensive from Tesla Direct versus if you're going through, a third-party dealership or something like that. And you and I kind of talked back and forth on this, but I was honestly really close to paying even a few $1,000s more just because the experience with Tesla Direct was so much better versus the garbage experience that existed going through these individual used car dealerships.
This is funny, and this is where I mentioned our paths would have split because when I'm buying, I've looked at new, I've looked at used. I really don't have much of a preference there. I just want my Rivian. But if I was buying a Tesla today, I'd have to look at the options. But I can tell you without a doubt, I would buy directly from Tesla, whether it's a new vehicle or an inventory vehicle. And I can also tell you, I would not even I hope for the rest of my life I never have to step foot in a dealership. The Toyota in my town is great. That's where I bought my vehicle. I would technically buy again, but I don't want anything to do with a dealership. I think
That's
that,
awful.
and we did a whole podcast episode, Gabe, in the past on direct to consumer, and that's exactly what Tesla's doing. You go on their website, you say buy now, and they say, hey, it's going to be in Loveland, Colorado in 2 weeks, and you pick it up and you leave, and that is my experience. I think at one point early on in Tesla, they'd actually bring it to your house and deliver it. I don't know if they still do that, but again, the whole buying experience in this case, Tesla, I think is phenomenal. And Gabe, you've seen it firsthand now.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really impressive, the direct to consumer model that they've built out. And what surprised me is that even for a very high ticket item, I was willing to do a direct to consumer model where it would just effectively be dropped off at my house. There were companies, for $500, they'll throw it on a truck and literally will drop it right off at your house. And so it's not even that crazy expensive, to ship it from different parts of the country. Yeah, it was really impressive. It was really interesting, and it wasn't. It's just something that even a year or two ago I wouldn't have considered spending, tens of thousands of dollars on something that was just going to come through the mail. It's just kind of wild. But with the advances of that technology and with the purchase process that they've laid out, with the positive reviews that they have now put broadly across the internet with all of the people who talk positively about the experience that they have with their Tesla, it gives you so much more confidence as a consumer to move forward with that purchase process.
I think that's a fantastic example, and I've been thinking like all day, even like at night now, Gabe, I'll eat dinner and then I'll like sit down and I'm like, well, let me just like look at Tesla a little bit. And like this has been something I've been looking at for the longest time. Um, we'll see what happens this year. I'm increasingly interested in hearing your experience, less so on the buying, but the actual driving, charging and the ownership. I think again, that's where you've become sounds like a brand advocate.
100%. I would speak very positively about it. Now I've only had it for not even 2 weeks, so it's still a very new experience for me. So I've been in that fun honeymoon phase where everything's exciting and new. But regardless, I've definitely become it's been a very positive experience, at least since I got through the dealership process of actually getting the car. That was terrible. Well, and this sort of leads nicely, Zach, into other things that we wanted to talk about around like tips to build a great customer experience and maybe things to avoid a terrible customer experience like I have with a lot of these dealers. The first one that you had on the list here, which I think is so spot on, is putting yourself in your customer's shoes to really understand the problems that they're going to have or the challenges that they're going to have through the purchase process. And that is something that I really feel like the dealers that I went through didn't do, because they wouldn't respond to online messages. If they did respond, it was very curt and not helpful. Even when I picked up the phone and called, as soon as I did, I would be told about all of the additional fees that were going to be associated with purchasing from them. They just didn't think at all, what is the experience for the customer on the other end of this phone or other end of this direct message going to be when I actually reach out and speak to them?
Yeah, and we'll talk about this, at a high level here in a few minutes. Again, we'll have to do a whole separate episode on these, but putting yourself in the customer's shoes too. I feel like I always go back to the digital experience. I feel like that's probably where I spend a lot of my time. But how did your customers interact with your business website or social media accounts, however you position yourself? I think that's a fantastic thing to think about as well. I mentioned people walking away from a product if it's too complex or too complicated. I think this fits right in here too. Put yourself in your customer's shoes. Let's say again, you buy a new car and you have this terrible experience at the dealership, right? The dealership should have been looking at that, Gabe, and thinking, how would I like to go through this experience that Gabe just did? Calling around, talking to people, looking at these added fees. Nobody wants to go through that.
No. Well, and they legitimately cost themselves money by making the process more complicated than it needed to be. Because as soon as I did find a dealership that just didn't suck when it came to the experience that I was having, it immediately meant that I was going with that one. And I had found a car there that I liked as well, but I'd found lots of other cars at other places. But the experience was so bad going through that purchase process that I was like, I don't even want to deal with these people. Like, this is just awful. And as soon as I found one that just wasn't terrible, that was the one that I was going to go with.
Yeah, and I mentioned the digital experience too, and I think the next item here, optimizing your website, is fantastic. Every website CRM or analytics platform I've ever used has been able to break down, desktop and mobile traffic. And the way I always talk about this is if you know that a lot of your customers are going to your mobile website, you better make sure that your mobile website is optimized for that experience. Mm-hmm. Also, I might be critical here, but I'm going to 100% say I'm spot on. There's nothing worse than a slow website or a poorly designed website as well. So not only are you thinking of the mobile versus desktop experience, but again, designing your websites, your digital platforms with your customer in mind. How do you want them to interact with your website? I came from banking, Gabe. We redesigned our website. We redesigned our online banking platform. All of that was based on how do my customers want to interact with us in this digital platform?
Yeah, I don't think I sent you all of the examples of websites that I ran across as I was going through this purchase, but there was one in particular that was extremely atrocious, and it looked like something out of 1995 for starters. But then the other piece, it had this huge block of text on the website, big block of text that talked about, it was basically like a legal disclaimer. Bought as is, we're not responsible for, any bad experience that you have after you purchase this car. It was so negative. And there was a car there that I really liked. It fit all my, criteria. And I looked at that and went, nope, there is zero chance I am doing business with this company. Massive red flag, right? So not only do you need to just think about how is this designed from a visual perspective and does it look good? But is this literally going to turn off my potential customer when they come and look at this? And that was the case in this particular example. It just completely turned me off, and I was out of there as quickly as I possibly could.
Yeah, and Gabe, at the beginning of this episode, I talked a little bit about Google reviews and whether or not you would leave Google reviews. And that goes into the next one here, which is listening to your customers, right? Listen and engage on social media. This is where people go to complain or compliment, They share their delights and, their desires for your services as well. But not only listening to this feedback from your customers, but responding to it, making them feel like they're being listened to as well. I think that's another fantastic option.
Agreed, and this is true whether it's a positive or a negative review. If it's a positive review, awesome. Say thank you. It's easy. Just reach out and just a quick thank you for an appreciation for the fact that person left you a positive review. If it's a negative review, yeah, you know what, you probably don't want to engage with it, but you should still. You mentioned this. If reach out, offer to make things better, and if nothing else, it gives that person an opportunity to maybe go back and even change their score, and adjust how they think about your business. So whether it's a positive or negative, I know responding to the negative ones is never fun, but it's something that's really necessary.
Absolutely. And Gabe, the next one here is one that I think you and I do on a daily basis, and that is anticipating customer needs, because your customers are going to grow, their needs are going to change. How are you responding to that? How are you interact with the customers as they grow?
Well, and to go back to the example that we used to start the podcast, Southwest, they have decided to completely upend their business model based on the needs and feedback that they got from their customers and prospects. Their customers, people who aren't using their service right now, told them specifically, if you change and do this thing and let me pick my seat, I will be much more likely to use your product again. So it's a really simple thing, but just listening to your customers and listening to their needs has now completely flipped their business model on its head.
Absolutely. And Gabe, this is the last one here I want to talk about, is letting customers help themselves. And this is an interesting one because we've talked about different habits of different generations in the past here. And there's no denying that I think that the white glove support is great. I think of Tesla again. I've seen videos of people buying the Tesla, and the Tesla guide or whatever they call the Tesla employees, like, hey, do you want me to show you how to do this or walk you through this? And when I test drove my Tesla, it was the same thing. It was like, hey, do you want me to show you around here? And I was like, nope, I've got it, right? I watched my YouTube video, I could figure it out. But then I got home, I put it in my garage, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to play around. I kind of figured it out a little bit myself now that I'm by myself. And that's the statistic behind this, the data behind this is more than half of Gen Z, just over 50%, prefers that self-service, which compares to 35% of millennials, 30% of Gen X, and 25% of boomers wanting that self-service. I mean, you could think of the self-checkout lanes at the grocery store. I actually went to the grocery store last night, and I did not use self-checkout because there was no line. But you better believe, 10 times out of 10, I'm going to the self-checkout. Or McDonald's has those giant touchscreen kiosks. In college, the cashier lane would be open, and we would still go to the touchscreens and do it ourselves. So letting your customers help themselves, we're seeing a lot of growth, again, in that Gen Z wanting to do that themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it gets back to letting them purchase in the way that they want to purchase too. That's the other thing that was really, really difficult through this whole car buying process, is just how am I actually going to get you money to hand over the money to pay for the car. It's, oh, well, you got to have a cashier's check, or you've got to, I'm like, well, can I just wire you the money? Really? We're
Venmo, man.
Yeah, exactly. Can I just transfer the money to you? This is ridiculous. But there's so much antiquation around, it's so antiquated around some of these processes. And whether that even be, I have to pick up the phone and actually have a conversation with people over at the dealer. That was the other thing that was infuriating. I can't remember if I told you this, but I'd find these cars online and I would reach out to the dealer and they'd be like, oh, they're gone. I cannot tell you how many times that happened. And I'm going, guys, just update your website, update your inventory. Come on. Why would I want to pick up the phone and have a conversation with you when you're telling me that 4 cars that were on your website are now completely gone? She's like, what are we doing? It's such a bad experience for the customer. So yeah, especially for that younger generation who is used to having things when they want, being able to engage the way that they want, having your customers be able to help themselves in the way that makes sense to them or buy in the way that they want to buy, it's a great way to drive up your revenue and take dollars away from your competition.
I agree, Gabe. And you know me, I always love talking about customer experience. We definitely need to do another episode or two on customer experience, especially as we have these examples. I mean, you think back, and I'm sure everyone listening can align with either the example of the water bottle or the buying a Tesla, right? But there's so many different customer experiences out there, and so many entry points to that customer journey.
Yeah, that's the huge part. Is as I was talking to Zach about this and thinking about all of the different things that I did throughout this buyer journey, quote unquote, I was just all over the place. And again, we love to think about our customers going down this happy path of, they saw an ad and then they did a little bit of research and then they went to my website and then they bought and everybody's happy. It very rarely happens that way. So thinking about where people are entering throughout the journey and making sure that there is that consistency, as Zach said, whether it's pre-purchase, post-purchase, that from a brand perspective, the customer's feeling like you've got their arms wrapped, or like your arms are kind of wrapped around them as a consistent brand, as a consistent brand throughout that entire journey. So important to driving loyalty.
Absolutely, Gabe. And that is all the time we have today. So thank you for tuning in to Buffering. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app and to share it with your friends and colleagues as well. And for more insights and updates, be sure to connect with Gabe and I on LinkedIn and visit our podcast blog at bit.ly/bufferingpodcast for even more content and resources.